Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm excited to have on the podcast today Jim Rowe. So, Jim has been a longtime USCA coach for quite some time, and he's currently the coach education lead at Playtri. And Playtri is one of the largest retailers, and they also have a pretty substantial coaching business attached to it as well. So, welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. By the way, I love the hat and the jacket. Those are pretty sweet.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to represent the brand here.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. So I wanted to start off with a little bit about your background. I feel like a lot of the people within the endurance space, they have been lifelong endurance athletes, went to school for exercise physiology or kinesiology, whatever it is. Your background's a little bit different, a little more unique from your education to your path to becoming a full-time tri coach. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe for our listeners, if we could start off by talking about sort of your background, education, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. Grew up as a sports or a team sports athlete. Played soccer. Went to college and sat on the bench for 4 years.
Okay.
And uh, and at the end, and while I was in college, I was actually a religion and classical language major. So I Um, had a lot of fun reading ancient texts, Homeric poetry, things like that.
Wow.
Um, and then when I finished college, I went to seminary. I'm an ordained Lutheran pastor. And I also was really kind of burnt out on the team sports kind of intensity that was a um, big part of sports at that time. Yeah, even at the Division 3 level that I was playing at for soccer, and I had grown up, running as a soccer player. I'd been a swimmer for a while as a kid, and wanted to find something that I was relatively competent in. And so I think 2004, I did my first triathlon. And so becoming a pastor and being a pastor kind of went together with my experience as a triathlete. And then got into coaching in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So how did that, I guess the next question, I guess, is how did you make the decision? Because I know you're working full time with Playtri right now
Yep.
as a coach. So what was that like, sort of that decision to step away from being a pastor to being that full-time coach? Because that they again, while you said they sort of are can certainly work well together, they also seem very different, right? So I was wondering if
Yeah.
you could chat about that.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I always went at coaching from like a sports model. I just have the mind for sports.
Okay.
Maybe isn't necessarily the best route to go with pastoral ministry, but I was always very concerned about people's well-being
Hmm.
and the health of the congregation um, and just thought from the perspective of a body, whether it was an individual or like a corporate body, right? A community. And that really tended to like go well with my passion for sports and uh, you know taking a look at my own experience of like having to relearn how to swim after a shoulder injury
Hmm.
and noticing like, oh, this my body position is off, or I'm not getting enough rotation, or my shoulder is uh, just not getting enough mobility here. And so um, that really, I would look at my own experience as an athlete, and then I would look at my experience as a pastor, and I would say, oh, this is off a little bit. Something's going on here. How can we address that to
Hmm.
help move more towards health? Um, and so I always kind of saw them going like hand in hand. Um, and uh, and I think that was kind of a unique perspective. And I think it still is a unique perspective. I mean, I tend to bring into my coaching um, a lot of concern for my athletes' total well-being. Um, I don't just say, here's your workouts, do them if you, do them or else. It's more of like, hey, what's going on in your life? What are the things that I need to be aware of to help you succeed at this? And if you are going through a hard time, it's really helpful to know that so that you're not getting frustrated and you're not getting disappointed. Um, and you can continue to make improvements, even if that means we have to slow down a little bit because um, life stress, work, family, some type of crisis or whatever needs to be taken care of.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, it's so interesting you said that, about being a unique experience. When I was growing up, my parents went to church every Sunday, so I went to church every Sunday. Or Presbyterian, and I
Mhm.
don't think once, I mean, I'm sure not once, ever was, health as far as the physical or even really the mental side ever really discussed, ever.
Sure.
And I'm not, again, that was a while ago, so I don't know if things have changed, but it sounds like to your point, saying that it is still a unique thing probably doesn't happen as much as it needs to. But and then
Right.
that kind of led into my next question, which you kind of answered, which was how has being a pastor really influenced how you work with your athletes? So it sounds like quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I think where I tended to shine as a pastor and just from was in difficult situations, right? Like
Mm,
uh, it, it seems kind of morbid to say it, but I think I was really good at like at the deathbed
mm,
and at the funeral, or in the ICU, right? When
yeah,
somebody somebody's terribly ill, right? And I
sure.
show up. I felt like I was a very calming presence, and um, I think my athletes get that same response when we
Yeah,
have conversations and when I'm working with them one on one or even as a group. Um, and and I think that's just sort of my personality. I'm not like screaming at off screaming and making myself all red in the face. I'm much more of like, hey, what's going on here? How can we address this? How can I help? Uh,
yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, it's so interesting too because the person that I actually was just released today, the podcast with this Dr. Lawrence Van Lingen, who's
yeah,
this running specialist. His whole thing, for what it's worth, is very this holistic, systemic approach to running form,
yeah,
well, just in general. But and just like you said, you cannot separate these things. The emotional, the spiritual, the physical. It all plays
right.
in together. And if you try to treat or coach a person in isolation with any of these specific things, it just doesn't work. So it's great that you take that holistic approach to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So moving on to sort of a different topic. So when you first started coaching, you had your own coaching practice.
Hmm.
And then now, again, obviously you're working full time with Playtri. As I mentioned in the intro, you're the coach education lead for them. So I guess what did that look like, that transition from one to the other? And if because I think a lot of the coaches that we certify, they get certified and then the question is, okay, now what? Do
Right,
I
right.
join a play try type organization or CTS or whatever, or do I try to go it alone? And certainly there have been many shifts. One of the coaches, Cliff Pittman, coached on his own, and now he works for CTS, similar in a similar role. He's kind of the coach education lead there.
Yeah.
So I think it might be helpful to our listeners, especially the coaches or especially new coaches. What have you found to be some of the pros and cons of kind of doing your own thing versus working for an organization like Playtri?
Yeah. So I should say that the transition to full-time coaching took a while. I
Sure.
didn't jump into it right away. And part of the shift was out of necessity. Um, my wife, we were living up in New York. I was serving a congregation in New York, and my
Okay.
wife got a tenure track position down here in the Dallas area. And we had a 1 month old when we moved, and
Okay.
there's not many Lutherans in the area. Uh,
Okay.
so, uh, and I knew that I wanted to, and I was coming off of a shoulder injury. And I knew that even with the shoulder injury, even if I couldn't compete anymore, I still wanted to be involved in the sport. And so uh, coaching was a kind of um, an obvious progression for that. Um, and so I started working with really some friends and acquaintances um, on running and triathlon. Uh,
Okay.
and then got connected with Playtri after I had been coaching for about a year or so. Uh,
Okay.
I I would say there's uh, the pros and cons for being on your own. The pros definitely you get to set your own agenda, you get to set your own pricing, you tend to be able to set your own schedule. And when you're starting out, that's not a bad place to be. Um, I think I was listening to something from like Steve Magnus or something about when you're first starting out a new venture, don't rush in 100%, but
Mm,
slowly build over time. And so I was pretty intentional about that. And I think that's really beneficial for a new coach. I think the cons are it really kind of depends on your personality. I am I'm not the type of personality that holds a room. When I show up, I'm more of a wallflower, and I work well one-on-one with people. If you have that personality where you are much more comfortable going out and talking with strangers and meeting people one-on-one and at races and offering up your card, like coaching on your own is excellent. Um, but I also realized that there was a strength or a pro with Playtri was the brand recognition. Uh,
sure.
I was a relatively new coach in a new area, and I knew that uh, establishing my brand, so to speak, would take a lot of time and energy. And working with Playtri really cut that time down.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I go to races here in the DFW area, and people people see Playtri, right, on my race kit, or um, they've been to one of our open water swims that we have on Saturdays that's open to the community, and pay a drop-in fee or whatever. Um, and I've coached those,
Yeah.
and people recognize me. And so it adds a lot especially if you're in a new area and there's an opportunity to work with an organization that has a lot of recognition.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. You sort of have that almost built-in credibility, right? Kind
Yep,
of right from the get-go.
definitely.
So question for you. So there are a lot of different coaching organizations out there today. Obviously, coaching has grown over the years, and some
Mhm.
people even like you said, I might start my own coaching practice. I realize that more people want to train or coach with me than I can handle, so I hire coaches underneath me. What are
Yep.
some of the things that some of the due diligence that you did before you signed? Because you obviously sound like a person that does their homework, make sure it's the right organization, it's the right fit for them. What was some of the due diligence that you did about Playtri before you sort of signed on that dotted line and said, yes, I want to coach with you?
Yeah. So I actually reached out to Morgan Hoffman, the head coach, just as an opportunity to speak with an experienced coach and get some pointers.
Mm,
And during our conversation, it just sort of it kind of led to led to a job offer.
okay. Awesome.
I didn't go in expecting it.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
a great conversation.
yeah, right. And so the uh, then I followed up. I said, all right, what does this look like? And Playtry has a couple of different ways of coaching, right? I'm a contract coach, and so I'm not at this one of the stores 5, 6 days a week, um, like a full-time coach. I'm not a part-time coach, so there is still some of like the private practice falls on me, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I took a look at the contract that I was going to be signing. I asked a lot of questions about like what's the possibility for growth? Um, is there a is there an option for me to learn some other skills that would be beneficial as a coach? Can I learn about the retail side of the business? Can I um, learn how to be a bike fitter? Can I learn how to learn some bike mechanic stuff? Um, and then I actually talked to my coach back in New York. Um, I realized that my coach in New York, Mark Wilson, was a friend of Playtri's founder, Ahmed Zahir. Um, and so I contacted Mark and I said, "Hey, Mark, what do you know about this organization? They've offered me a position. What do you think?" And he said, as a new coach, that's going to be an excellent place for you to grow in your skill set and get a lot of education and mentorship. And
Yeah.
I that's a great great thing to have, especially as
Yeah.
a now.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome that you were able to be exposed to all those sort of ancillary areas that, that you like, whether it be the retail side or the bike fitting side or bike mechanics and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I come from the majority of my career prior to USCO was spent as a personal trainer in New York City. And it's very similar, right? Working for yourself as a personal trainer versus a club. And I think a lot of the trainer, purely looking at it from the income standpoint, a lot of people say, well, why would I work for XYZ health club, when versus I could do it on my own, but I'd make 50% less at the health club. And I
right.
think it's a mistake to look at it solely from the dollar standpoint. You make up typically what you might lose in, per session fee, you often make up in volume for one.
Yeah. Yep.
And two, you're out there on an island. You don't have that mentorship. You don't have those, built in other areas that you can learn. And so that sounds like an incredible opportunity for you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's great to have that mentorship and be like, hey Morgan, I've got a question. Hey Ahmed, I've got a question. And then to have that exposure too, right?
Yeah,
Like, um, at our store in Dallas, not only can I help with the retail side, but I do bike fits when I'm there. I do performance testing. I can do swim lessons because we have an endless pool. And so there's all that added exposure. Oh,
sure.
somebody signs up for a swim lesson. Somebody signs up for a bike fit. Oh, can I tell you about our coaching? Let me tell you about the camps that we have coming up. Um, and if I was on my own, it would be going to races in the area and trying to do the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's incredible. Well, and you obviously alluded to this, and I think it's a good segue into the next one. You know, coaches typically, they'll do the standard coach, right? They do the normal coaching. They might do some strength training. They might do some so on and so forth. But physiological testing is one area that is often not part of a coach's repertoire for many reasons. One, they don't know how, but also they might not have the equipment, whether it be a metabolic cart, blood lactate, whatever it is. So it's incredible. It's awesome that you're able to offer that. So when did you kind of add that aspect to your services, and how would you say that it's helped your overall coaching practice? I mean, you sort of alluded to it, but if maybe you could dig in a little deeper with that one.
Yeah. So Playtri has been offering performance testing long before I started. Um, and when I first started at Playtri, I actually worked at one of our stores one day a week to get an understanding of the retail side of things.
Hmm.
And we offered performance testing at that store. Um, and so I got trained to do our blood lactate testing.
Okay.
And our blood lactate testing is something that we actually require for all of our individually coached athletes,
Okay.
because we have found over the years of over 20 years of testings with like over 1,000 athletes that that gives us the best heart rate zones for training and racing.
Okay.
And and so that's our starting point with all of our athletes when we first start working with them individually. The other performance testing that we do VO2 max testing, and then we do a VO2 calorie expenditure test
Okay.
that allows us to see how many calories are being burned at different heart rate levels, and then the makeup of those calories, whether it's carbohydrates or fat, and how much of each. And that VO2 calorie expenditure testing I have found incredibly beneficial just from my own racing standpoint.
Mm.
That was really beneficial over the last couple of years when I qualified and raced for 70.3 Worlds and then the Ironman Worlds last year. But then also for my high performing athletes who have really big or ambitious goals, to know uh, one, how many calories are burning at different heart rate levels, and then two, if we need to make any adjustments to their metabolic efficiency. Um, and if they're burning too many carbohydrates at a low heart rate level, that's just not sustainable.
Hmm.
So then that impacts the type of training that we do uh, as we try to change that to improve that for race day.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Do you find with obviously Dallas is a pretty big market. Do you find that a lot of non-Playtri coaches have their athletes come into you to get tested and then you give that data to coaches, or is it more everything sort of within the Playtri sort of ecosystem?
I would say the majority are people within the Playtri ecosystem. We do get some athletes that come in for VO2 max testing or heart rate testing
Okay.
um, that are working with some other coaches
Okay.
or are individually, coaching themselves. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So I guess this is more of I guess a athlete coach question.
Yeah.
So if I'm an athlete, I'm training for whatever race I'm training for. Um, how beneficial do you think? So it sounds like lactate testing. If I had to choose one test, that would probably be the one to do. And then corollary to that, would you say that VO2 max or a combination of the two, or the metabolic testing, sort of? How important do you think all of that is for just a weekend warrior type athlete?
Yeah. It really depends on their goals, right? Um, I would say the majority of my athletes were good with just the resting or the blood lactate testing.
Okay.
Um, and my athletes that are trying to, go sub 5 at a 70.3 or trying to qualify for a world championship, then we really suggest these other tests, the
Okay.
calorie expenditure testing. And then also I should say the sweat. We do the sweat testing with precision fuel and hydration as well.
Oh, nice.
And
That's great.
that's all of those tests are really beneficial for like our athletes that have the big goals or the high performing athletes, because um, we also like to uh, uh, keep track of their intake during their big key training sessions, right?
Gotcha.
So how much weight have you lost during that workout? How many carbs did you consume? How much do you drink? How much sodium did you take in? And that
Hmm.
really helps develop our race strategy.
Got it. And I think the other thing too, which it sounds like it's so great that you guys do, because there are certainly labs you can go to, right,
Mhm.
and have all this stuff tested, and most of them I'm sure would give some feedback. But it's nice
Yeah.
that within the Playtry ecosystem that it's not just okay, here's your test results, but here's what it means, here's what we can do about it, here's how to
Yeah.
correlate these different data points and metrics.
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely love doing those tests with my athletes because it gives me an opportunity to take a look at like run form, bike mechanics, bike fit stuff. And then, even with the endless pool right in our store, like if we're doing a calorie expenditure test on the bike, uh, you know, and they have a goal specifically for like a really fast 70.3, might have them jump in the endless pool for 30 minutes for a swim, and then quick transition to the bike for the test. So we get
Yeah.
a good sense of what they're burning and what that looks like after the fatigue of the swim.
Yeah. That is so cool that it's all literally in
Yeah, it's
minutes.
awesome. It's awesome.
That is very cool. No, is that a completely off topic, obviously, to everything, but is that a pretty close drive from where you live that you can get there pretty quick, do the test, and still get your day done?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not. So
Oh, okay.
it's about a 45-minute drive to an hour, depending on traffic.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's when I go in, it's a full day.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so So you're working with Playtri 100%, and
Yep.
you kind of talked about this earlier. Do you find, even though it might not be your strong suit, that you still need to kind of market your services, obviously through Playtri, but you need to do a lot of your own marketing as well, or do you rely more on Playtri's in-house marketing to kind of market you?
Yeah, it's a combination.
Okay.
Um, uh, like I said, personality wise, I don't tend to go and talk to strangers.
Yeah.
Just who I am.
Yeah. Same.
Playtry does Playtry does a great job of marketing. Um, and then really just kind of the different we do local races. We're at the US based Ironman races as well. And so being at those events really helps my get my name out there.
Yeah.
And then I've got a social media presence, and then I do uh, like workshops on Facebook Live, Zoom,
Mm,
and as a way to kind of continue to get my name out there. So it's a
yeah.
combination.
That's great. It's really fascinating because that question comes up a lot. Do you work for yourself or do you work for an organization? And there's and the typical pros and cons typically come up, but never once have I talked to anyone that dealt with the whole like personality type. You introvert, extrovert,
Yeah,
and I'm certainly of the introvert. I love
yeah,
one-on-one conversations, not so much a fan of groups and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't be the person to go up to strangers in a room. Um,
sure.
but it's so critically important. And it didn't even really occur to me, honestly, until you started talking about that. But I think that's one of the reasons why, uh, I kind of thrived more in that, working for a health club versus
Mhm.
doing it on my own. Like I did it, but there was always that level of being uncomfortable, which is fine. You have to get out of your comfort zone sometimes, but,
Right.
going out there and marketing yourself, I think that's I mean, of all the things you said, I think for the listeners, that might, in my opinion, that might be the biggest takeaway for those coaches that are trying to figure out, okay, do I go it on my own or do I, join an organization?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that's that recognition is really beneficial. Um, you know, Playtry, like I said, Playtry does a great job marketing me.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just being on the different social media systems, right?
Yeah.
So uh they tend to target different audiences and different age groups, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
for my older athletes, I'm on Facebook, Instagram for my middle-aged athletes, and then I've started TikTok recently to kind of try to get connected with some younger athletes.
Yeah.
Strava, like I've been at races and people are like, you're Jim Rowe, right? And I'm like, yes, who are you? Oh, I follow you on Instagram, or I've seen you on Strava, or you were at a race recently or whatever, right? And so that having that presence helps tremendously,
Yeah.
whether you're doing it on your own or you have somebody else doing it for you.
Yeah. And you make a great point about the demographics, kind of determining, I guess, what demographic you want to do or want to, really appeal to, and then finding the social platform that probably lends itself, the most to that.
Right.
Do you find, I'm guessing that it's not equal amounts of time between, say, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook is probably one that you do more of. Do you find that let's say you do your own social media. Obviously, Playtry does some for you. Do you
Mhm.
find that it's, I guess, exhausting, for lack of a better word, trying to create content across the different platforms and trying to uh, speak to the different demographics separately, or how does that? Because I know that that's some of the things that our coaches will say, that it's almost exhaustion where they're trying to be everywhere at one time versus focus on one thing or two things. Any advice on there that you might give coaches?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is probably the best place to start.
Okay.
We're a very visual society these days,
Yeah.
and so Instagram offers some really good options for um, video and then still photo. I would say the majority of people who that I know that look at Instagram are not listening to the audio on Instagram, and so
Okay.
if you're gonna put a video on there, make sure that there's some type of description or it, have some pop-up captions or whatever. And then uh, what is it? Excuse me. Uh, Facebook business. You can develop a post on there and then put it on to schedule it for Facebook and Instagram, and you can change the descriptions for each of them if you really want.
Yeah. Sure. So I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. So if an athlete is or a coach is going to be spending time marketing their services, um,
Mhm.
there's so many avenues. And obviously a lot of this bleeds over one to the next. You can put a blog post on
Yeah.
Facebook and all that kind of stuff. Obviously nowadays social media is critically important. Would you say it's probably like I think Instagram is nice, right? Because it's sort of that sweet spot between the Facebook and TikTok demographic.
Right.
Would you say, if you had to spend, let's say you had an hour a week to spend on, growing your um, social media and maybe Instagram would then be the place to start?
Yeah, yeah. That's where I would start. And I would
Okay.
try to get really good at it. I'm still developing with that myself, but that's where I would start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, for what it's worth, that's what we found on the USCA side as well. It's
Yeah.
that definitely seems to get the most engagement, the most likes, the most all that kind of stuff. Because I think also maybe because Facebook owns Instagram, there's that nice sort of carryover between those
Yep.
two as well.
Yeah.
Um, so last question for the podcast, and this is something that we do get asked as well, like what does a day in the life look like of a coach? And obviously that's going to vary if it's someone's, just very, very part-time or if someone's 100% full-time. But for Jim Rowe, what does it look like at sort of an average day in the life for you as a coach?
Yeah. Great question. It really depends on the day of the week for me. Mondays, get my kids off to school, get my own training in, and then from about noon until 8 p.m. I've got phone calls with athletes and
Okay.
responding to emails. Little break in there to pick up kids from school, and then family dinner. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday look pretty much the same. So again, get the kids off to school, get my own training in, and then I've got some phone calls or meetings, looking over data on training peaks, replying to emails, assigning workouts. And then Friday and Saturday, depending on the week, I'm in the store in Dallas, or I'm coaching open water swim or swim lessons, doing bike fits, doing performance testing, what have you. And then Sundays off. I try not to check email or get on the computer at all on Sundays.
Nice. Good for you. Good for you. So I lied. I have one more question.
Okay.
So I think the other question that comes up quite frequently with coaches, especially new coaches, is how do I determine how many athletes to have, right? Especially if it's going to be their full-time gig. You got to pay the rent, you got to keep the
Yep.
lights on. Um, but at the same time, you obviously don't want to saturate yourself where you're just being a crap coach, right? And you're
Yeah.
just, you now have 200 athletes and you're just giving them all the same program. So for you personally, obviously it's maybe a little different for you because it's not a side gig, it's a full time. But how do you determine how many athletes you can work with and feel like you're still doing a really, really good job? And then have you ever hit that threshold where Playtri, let's say they keep giving you athletes, you're like, great, great, great. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, either I'm overwhelmed, I'm finding it's bleeding into my Sunday,
Yeah.
or just I can't manage it. How do you sort of navigate that?
Yeah, I have found over the years that right around 20 athletes is the the most that I can handle, the
Okay.
individual athletes.
Okay.
Um, and we have different levels, coaching levels. And our higher levels tend to take a little bit more time and energy because there's more planning involved. Um, and so I say 20, but if I have more high level athletes, then I'm gonna kind of self-select to go down a little bit more. So generally, I sit somewhere between that 15 and 20 athletes at a time.
Okay.
And knowing that some of those athletes are going to be with me for a long time, and some of those athletes are going to be with me for maybe a year. Um, so uh, even if I'm comfortably in that 15 to 20 range, I'm still uh, trying to market myself and my services. Uh,
Yeah.
and then, there's athletes that I work with that are just for one-on-one sessions or swim lessons, and that's so it's uh yeah, it's kind of a mix, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Gotcha. And like you said, you probably know ahead of time, okay, Bob Smith is going to be done at the end of this year. His big goal was whatever, Kona.
Yeah.
And then like from a marketing standpoint, okay, that's now I'm down to 19. So let's try to maybe replace that one. So I definitely need to speak to
Right.
Playtri or up my own marketing or whatnot.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, because I think that's such a critical thing. It's like, and sometimes it's just trial and error, like, okay, wow, I'm just overwhelmed. I can't do
Yep.
this kind of thing.
Yep.
Or, oh my gosh, I still have this much more time, or I need to make a little more money, or whatever it is. I feel like it's always that sort of balancing act, and there's obviously no right thing for every person. I think but I think that that's extremely valuable information. So,
Yeah. And I think the other aspect too, like as coaches, uh we tend to think that we can coach ourselves as well,
yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah.
and I found that trying to coach myself started to get into the way of coaching
Mm,
my athletes.
yeah.
And so at that point I said, all right, I need to hire my own coach.
Yeah.
And so that's when I approached Morgan Hoffman, who I guess is technically my boss, to coach me. Um, but that was also, that was beneficial because it took me off the plate,
Yeah.
but then it also was beneficial in that we coach within the same system.
Yeah.
And so not only was I doing well as an athlete, but I was also learning how to coach too,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and from somebody else. And so it was a good sort of athlete slash coach mentor role that has been really beneficial.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that because on the cycling side, same thing. I was a coach, and I also then had a coach, and it was interesting to me. I think the thing that was most valuable for me, aside from the coaching aspect, was that I then realized some of the challenges that my athletes were going through.
Mhm.
Whether it be not completing workouts or whatever it was, because you don't really appreciate it. I feel like until you've gone through it yourself, right? It's kind of
Yep.
like if you have a kid, you can appreciate that. Oh gosh, being a parent must be hard, but you can only really truly
Right.
appreciate it once you're the parent, right? and i
Right.
and i do feel that way, that if anything, even just for a month or just for a few training sessions, it would be helpful for coaches to go through to be the athlete, just so they understand the process, and understand what some of the dynamics are that you kind of don't ever get. Like, it was actually funny. I was reading this thing. It's kind of a sad story, but I was reading this story about this orthopedic surgeon. His entire life, he's one of the predominant back surgeons in the country. And he was cycling on the way to work one time, got hit by a car, and he's paralyzed from I think it's like the chest down.
Oh, wow.
And he said, he's like, I never knew, because he never was in that, he was never that guy. He goes, I think his words were, it's embarrassing how much I didn't know about, injury. before. And this is
Yeah.
a guy who spent his entire career doing this,
Right.
being a
Right.
back surgeon. So I do think that while an extreme example, I do think that sometimes you only learn it by experiencing it,
Right.
and I think you get more empathy and all sorts of things from that.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely true. Yeah.
Um, Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This has been great. I think you certainly gave a lot of great information. And like I said, I certainly love that point that you made about the personality types. That's really gonna stick with me. Um, so if anyone wants to learn more about Playtri, they can go to playtri.com. You can obviously contact Jim through them. If any of our listeners are interested in a USCA certification, you can use the code ATE75 for $75 off. And Jim, hopefully we can do this again. I love chatting with you. It's been long overdue to do this, so hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate the invite.
All right, you got it. Talk to you soon, Jim.
Yep. Take care.
Yeah, bye bye.
Bye.